Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever felt like just doing the right thing is completely exhausting? Like the weight of expectations is just impossibly heavy? Well, you are definitely not alone. Thousands of years ago, people were grappling with that exact same feeling. Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating ancient dialogue between King Yudhisthira and the revered sage Markandeya. What we're actually looking at here is how a highly structured ancient society viewed the immense, almost crushing burdens of virtue and duty. We're going to explore how they defined virtue, not as some, easy breezy path, but as a series of incredibly difficult sacrifices tied entirely to who you were in society. All right, so here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by exploring the dilemma of virtue. Then we'll look at deities on earth, followed by the burden of duty. And finally, we'll wrap up with Markandeya's reply. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The Dilemma of Virtue, Seeking the Subtle Truths of Morality. This really sets up the core problem of our explainer, King Yudhisthira's deep, genuine confusion about the severe duties required of different roles in his society. Listen to the tone of this quote. "I desire to hear, O Holy One, about the high and excellent virtue of women. I desire to hear from thee, O Brahmana, discourse about the subtle truths of morality." Notice how Yudhisthira isn't just asking for a quick cheat sheet or simple rules of thumb. He is asking a master for profound, incredibly difficult truths. By specifically asking about the subtle truths, he's acknowledging that virtue is rarely black and white. It's messy, it's intricate. And by highlighting his awe at the high virtue of women right out of the gate, he sets the stage for a deep dive into the demanding expectations placed upon very specific groups in this ancient world.
Moving to Section 2, Deities on Earth, Cosmic Elements and Human Authorities. Before we talk about specific individuals, we have to understand a foundational concept for this culture, the blending of nature and human authority into living gods.
Now, what's really wild about this list is how Yudhisthira groups things together. We have these immense, completely uncontrollable forces of nature, the sun, the moon, the wind, the earth, and the fire. But right alongside them, the father, the mother, and the preceptor, which is basically a teacher. This is a massive paradigm shift. It reveals that in this society, human authorities were viewed with absolute divine reverence. They were literally considered deities embodied. So showing respect to your parents or your teacher wasn't just about having good manners. It was a cosmic, religious obligation ordained by the gods themselves.
Which brings us to Section 3, the burden of duty, and the heaviest virtues to bear. Let's see exactly how Yudhisthira categorizes the sprawling, intense duties placed on specific members of his society.
So the heaviest burdens are basically split into these three distinct groups, and the sacrifices expected from them are just immense. First up, chaste wives. They were expected to completely restrain their senses, adore only one Lord, and to literally treat their husbands as gods. Yudhisthira openly states he sees nothing more difficult than this severe virtue. Then, you have devoted parents and their sons. Think about the physically hazardous 10-month gestation mothers endure and the absolute strict obedience required of their sons. And finally, the Kshatriyas, or the warrior class, whose very duty requires them to engage in acts of cruelty. For all three of these groups, achieving virtue isn't passive. It requires enduring immense physical, mental, or spiritual hardship.
Let's zoom in on that warrior class for a second, because the crucial point here is this inherent paradox. They are essentially trapped by their societal class. How in the world do you become a good, virtuous person when your literal job description requires violence? It's a massive moral puzzle. By fulfilling the duties of their order, they have to commit violent, cruel acts. Yet, somehow, through navigating this very violence, they are supposed to attain virtue. It really highlights how duty in this text isn't about being peaceful or gentle. It's about flawlessly executing your assigned role, absolutely regardless of how painful it is.
So how does the sage answer all this? Section 4, Markandeya's reply and the ancient division of sacrifice. This is the climax of the text, and Markandeya starts by breaking down the distinct sacrifices required of parents.
Markandeya answers by contrasting how differently, yet how intensely, both mothers and fathers suffer. He neutrally documents the terrifying physical hazard for the mother, carrying the child, surviving childbirth, and the sheer amount of affection required just to rear them. And against this, he places the father's severe spiritual asceticism, enduring extreme cold and heat, fasting, performing incantations, and practically begging the gods just to acquire children in the first place. Both roles are presented as monumental, exhausting burdens.
It's a true division of labor, but both sides are incredibly heavy.
But why do it, right? What is the payoff for all this suffering? Well, Markandeya zeroes in on the purpose behind it all. The ultimate goal is for both parents to see their sons achieve fame, prosperity, achievements, and virtue. In this framework, a son is considered virtuous specifically when he realizes the hopes of his parents. That's the only way these intense parental sacrifices are justified. If the son succeeds and makes his parents proud, he achieves eternal fame and virtue both in this life and the hereafter.
Finally, Markandeya addresses Yudhisthira's profound awe at the virtue of women. The text explicitly outlines the ancient patriarchal framework for wives. In this society, spiritual salvation for women was achieved exclusively through marital devotion. Markandeya says it point blank. Traditional religious rituals like sacrifices, ancestral offerings known as shraddhas, and fasts are not the path for them. Instead, it is through the singular, demanding focus of serving their husbands that they win heaven. This perfectly ties back to Yudhisthira's earlier realization. The rules for virtue are radically different depending on your identity, and the burden placed on women to achieve their salvation entirely through devotion to another human being was considered one of the heaviest and most difficult paths of all.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought to consider. We've seen how this ancient society believed that your path to virtue was entirely dictated by your role, whether as a mother enduring physical hazard, a father undergoing ascetic penances, a warrior committing cruel acts, or a wife dedicating her existence to her husband. It really makes you wonder about our world today. How heavily do our own cultural frameworks and expectations dictate the true burden of duty for us? Thank you so much for exploring this ancient dialogue with me, and I hope it leaves you with a fresh perspective on just how complex morality can truly be.